Hello, Connecticut, and welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. The title basically says it all. I'm Nancy Barrow, and I will be delving into this new state program and how it can help you and your family. This podcast will give you information you should know about Connecticut paid leave and maybe just a little bit more. Connecticut paid leave brings peace of mind to your home, family, and workplace. Welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. Vicki Shabo works at New America and is a gender equity expert, policy strategist, and coalition builder who has helped to win paid family and medical leave, paid sick time, equal pay, and pregnancy fairness policies affecting tens of millions of people in the United States. Shabo also founded and directs an entertainment-focused initiative called Rescripting Gender, Work, Family, and Care, which marries policy, research, and narrative expertise to resource TV, film, pop culture creators with the information that they need to tell more authentic and aspirational stories about work-family justice, gender equity, caregiving, and an inclusive economy. Vicki has worked as Senior Fellow for Gender Equity, Paid Leave and Care Policy and Strategy Founder and Director, Entertainment-Related Narrative and Cultural Change Practice at Better Life Lab at New America. Shabo has testified in the U.S. Senate and U.S. House of Representatives, state legislatures, and before the Democratic Party's Platform Committee. Her opinion pieces have been published in every outlet, almost, including CNN.com, The Hill, the New York Daily News, the New York Times, and others as well, and in national TV. She holds numerous degrees, including a law degree. She lives in Washington, D.C. And thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast, Vicki.
Thanks so much for having me, Nancy. It's great to be here.
Well, tell me a little bit about the Better Life Lab at New America. It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, well, New America itself is a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank based in Washington, D.C. with folks in lots of places in the U.S. And the Better Life Lab is our gender equity and intersectional work-family justice program. I have colleagues who are journalists and focused a lot on storytelling through news media. And then we do a lot of convenings, we do some research, and then my work focuses on policy and advocacy and pop culture storytelling, particularly TV and film. So we sort of do lots of different things to advance individuals, families, and communities and their ability to thrive through policy and culture change.
So cool. When did your passion for advocacy and action start? Were you always like that kid from an early age that you wanted to be like a change maker? Or did you see things that were unfair and you were like, okay, I'm mad, I need to do something?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been sort of oriented towards making change from a pretty young age. But I got really interested in paid leave and policies that allow people to care for themselves and their loved ones about 17 years ago when I was working at a large law firm that had very generous paid parental leave policies for attorneys, including both men and women, but had less generous policies, less time, less money for support staff, like the woman who was my admin assistant, who would have had 60% of her pay for 12 weeks instead of the 100% of my pay for 4 months, that I then added vacation time onto to be able to take a 5-month parental leave. And then we had hourly workers and contractors in the building that worked in the mailroom and the cafeteria and the child care center, backup child care, which was amazing. But for the workers there, not so much. For people who worked throughout the building, but would have had little or no time to care for a new child. And that sort of set me on the path, thinking about the class and race and gender components. Practiced law just for a pretty short period of time, like pure law. My background had been working on Capitol Hill, working with nonprofit groups and political candidates around polling and research to help inform strategy, went to law school kind of to marry those things together. And all of that took me to more than 9 years at a leading organization that fought for the Family and Medical Leave Act and then worked hand in hand with advocates and policymakers around paid family and medical leave and paid sick time, which Connecticut, of course, also has, was the first state in the country to pass. And I was excited to be part of that effort as an advisor and a helper. And then I was able to come here to New America about more than 6 years ago, to really think about what else needed to be built or invested in and what work needed to be done to pass paid family and medical leave at the national level. And in the meantime, to continue to seed state progress.
And let's talk about that because there is overwhelming support for a paid leave program nationally. And
Yeah.
why hasn't it happened yet? Is it all politics?
Well, that's a really good question. We got very close in 2021, as folks might remember. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things going on. So one, we are a very individualistic country, and people still tend to think, and policymakers, and I would say policymakers, not unfair, like policymakers on both sides of the aisle, tend to defer to what business lobby groups say, which in this case is not grounded in fact at all about how paid leave has actually shaken out at the state level and would not shake out at the federal level. But there's kind of fear of hurting business. I think even more clear now than before, deep ambivalence / hostility to equal roles of women and men and people of all genders in workplaces. So lots of sexism and misogyny that's still in there, lots of racial and class preconceptions. And I think really just a devaluing of unpaid care work that happens. And so all of that sort of adds up to paid family and medical leave, childcare, care for older people and people with disabilities, sort of being sidelined as a nice to have rather than a must have, sort of as a women's, I'm using scare quotes that you can't see on a podcast, but as a women's issue rather than as a core economic opportunity and growth and stability issue for the country. And that has meant that, yeah, that paid leave has sort of been put to the side when, in fact, it would have been the one policy that was on the table at that time that could have affected every household in America in a positive way. And I think it cannot be that the United States, as a once and hopefully again leading economic powerhouse, can be the only developed nation in the world that doesn't guarantee any form of paid leave to anybody. Like, that is just preposterous.
It's so
bad
disappointing.
for families.
Yeah,
It's bad for families. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for businesses. It's bad for health. Like, it is bad in every way. And so it can't be that we don't do something. But yeah, I mean, it didn't happen this year. What happened this year are these continuation of tax credits that are meant to incentivize the private sector to provide paid leave to some of their workers, but the paid leave that they can receive a tax credit for providing can be very low quality, meaning short duration, low wage replacement, and it doesn't have to be new paid leave. And so actually what we believe is happening and has happened since these tax credits first went into effect is just that to the extent they're being used at all, they're being used by companies that already were providing paid leave who are just getting a corporate tax break.
Right. And
that is, of course, not expanding access really to anybody.
Right. And someone who has a few part-time jobs is not going to be covered. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's, yeah.
Yeah. I think, the states, which I think was the second piece of the piece that I wrote, the states really are leading the way both in creating systems that ensure workers access to paid leave and make it easier for businesses who have workers who need paid leave to be able to support those workers and also do what they need to do to get work covered, are improving the quality of paid leave and the reach of paid leave, and are creating a broader and broader evidence base that shows all of the valuable ways in which paid leave enhances families, businesses, and the economy.
What other states do you think will get a paid leave policy? Who are you hearing on the horizon?
Yeah, well, there's different ways that states have gone about this. For
Mm,
example, in states that are a little have more conservative Republican leadership, we've seen innovations on getting parental leave for state workers, which has been one small step, I think, obviously for helping those people in those states who work for state government, but also in starting again to create an evidentiary base in those states about the value of these policies. But in terms of like comprehensive universal policies similar to the 13 states and the District of Columbia, including Connecticut, I think for 2026, all eyes are on Virginia, where the incoming governor has said that paid leave is a priority for her and that she would sign a bill that passed and was vetoed last year. I hope Virginia will be next. They just grew their Democratic legislative majority in the House pretty substantially. They have an incoming governor who's supportive. The Senate is also Democrat. And I say this not to be partisan, but just to reflect the realities of what we've seen before in Virginia that has seen, unfortunately, unilateral opposition from Republican lawmakers, even though we know in every single public opinion poll, that's been conducted in states and at the federal level, national level that I can think of in the last more than a decade, we see overwhelming bipartisan support across voters and residents across party lines. So really, this is a political problem. Back to your question before, it's not a voter intention problem or a citizen intention problem. Everybody sees the value and the need for paid leave
yeah, I
for
mean,
themselves and their loved ones.
yeah, the District of Columbia has it. So
Yes.
why wouldn't Virginia?
Right.
It
Also,
seems,
Maryland
yeah,
has the
Maryland, yeah.
policy.
Hmm.
Delaware has a policy that's
Yep.
going into effect next year. Maryland's will come online in a couple of years. And so, yeah, the whole sort of region has policies in place. And then as you go up the Eastern Seaboard, Pennsylvania has had a very active and actually in the legislature bipartisan bill for quite some time. Again, I think political, actually, they're sort of not each party not wanting to give credit to the other party has held that back, unfortunately. And so my hope for Pennsylvania is that there's leadership exercised at the gubernatorial level. We've seen Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania now stand up for trans kids, stand up for women's rights. I feel like he's focused on job creation and retention of young families in the state. It seems like paid leave would be a no-brainer for him to exercise some leadership on. Um, yeah, and then New Jersey has paid leave, New York has paid leave, Connecticut has paid leave, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. So yeah, I mean, Virginia obviously needs to be next.
Yeah, we hope so. So, well, let's switch gears to Hollywood and TV and film and all that good
Sure.
stuff. Tell me how you got involved in Hollywood. I think it's so interesting that you thought how influential Hollywood and TV and films are to our culture. And I just think it's so cool. Give me the
Thanks.
backstory to that.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Los Angeles, so grew up, for anybody who's ever been out there, you're like driving down Sunset Boulevard and you see like for your consideration billboards everywhere. Um, I did not grow up in the industry, but obviously it's kind of everywhere. I have friends, good friends who are part of the industry and of Hollywood, the TV and film industry in various ways. And after paid leave fell out of the Build Back Better Act, and I just was feeling like we cannot keep doing the same thing. There's got to be levers that we haven't addressed properly yet. I started to think about popular culture. It's something I had been curious about before and had sort of like started to explore and dabble in, but really hadn't had time. And then, when it became very clear that 2022 was not going to be about federal paid leave implementation, but was really going to be about some soul searching about what else needed to be built or invested in or created to create the scaffolding or yeah, sort of just move things forward in the public imagination. I started to think about how other organizations and groups had turned to Hollywood to have television and film uh, do a better job, a more nuanced job of authentic representation or depictions of situations that helped viewers see themselves and other people differently and maybe move them to action. So we have, historical examples that I think have some application, but obviously the media landscape is very different now. But seatbelts, for example, became popularized because they were part of Happy Days, the television show Happy Days. Um, the term designated driver came about because Mothers Against Drunk Driving worked with creatives in Hollywood, Norman Lear in particular. And
Yeah, I remember that
so
in Cheers, like a big deal
yeah,
with drunk driving and all
so
that stuff.
yeah, and the seatbelts was Norman Lear
Yeah.
too, actually, and Ralph Nader. And so I started to think about like there are families, there are work situations, there are people navigating their jobs, their lives, and family care should have family caregiving. We know it's not seen very often, but and parenting in lots of shows, and it seems like an easy way to infuse just an awareness that you're not alone when you're kind of pulling yourself up by your feeling like you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and navigate. Like that is a system that was designed not with today's families in mind. And there are systemic cultural and policy interventions that can get us out of this, that can make things better. And so, yeah, I spent about 6 months of 2022 talking to other organizations and people that have been doing this work, to writers and producers, and people in production companies, executives, about how they had seen other organizations do this work, with people in philanthropy who had invested in this work before. And just started to did our first event with a group called Storyline Partners that we're a member of in the middle of 2022 in the summer. And then, yeah, launched our project called Rescripting Gender, Work, Family, and Care at a conference in 2022 that brings together writers, showrunners, executives, and social justice advocates and thought leaders. And yeah, have been steadily since then creating materials, commissioning research, doing briefings and presentations, reading scripts, looking at pitch decks, writing op-eds, trying to amplify on social media examples that we think are good. And this year, pioneering for the first time some social impact work that has brought together the advocacy community that I've been working with for the last 16 years, with a short film that really encapsulates a lot of the issues that new parents in particular deal with. A short film that a really excellent filmmaker named Risha Rudola had created called Cow Heavy and Floral. And we've brought together brain trusts with national groups that work on maternal health and paid leave and
Mm.
childcare, as well as advocates and coalition leaders from 19 states to kind of view the film. And from there, that film has now been to statewide breastfeeding conferences. It's been to maternal health conferences. It's being shown for coalition partners with a major health organization that focuses on prenatal and young children health and well-being. And so it's really exciting to see the marriage of art and policy and advocacy community conversations that can help to shift people's imaginations and intentions to become active in their communities, like in different ways than just traditional advocacy can. We commissioned some research earlier this year that shows that 92% of streaming viewers between the ages of 18 and 59 in the US say it's important to see work characters, work family situations kind of embedded into the shows and films that they're watching. And 65% of viewers, including 85% who say that these stories are very important, say this affects their decision to subscribe or stay subscribed to a streaming service.
Oh, I love
So
that.
that's the business case. We also know audiences say and behave in more engaged way when this content is on screen. And you can look to like very popular shows that embed kind of very rich stories about work family conflict. These are like some of the highest rated shows on television, the most watched shows. I actually just watched Peacock's All Her Fault
Mm.
this weekend, which is, a show that is about a kidnapping, but embedded in that is all sorts of conflict around work and family and gender roles and women bearing more of a load. But it also includes a depiction of a really beautiful story of a dad who provides hands-on care to a disabled child
Mm.
in a way that shows capability and joy and competence and equal parenting. And so I think those nudges, those cultural nudges, are very important. shows like High Potential, which is the number one new show on ABC last year. It talked about childcare in the very first episode. So these are things that really can help to just help people see things in a way that doesn't make them feel so alone and doesn't make them feel like whatever they're managing is their fault alone.
I know Bradley Cooper did a documentary about caregiving with his father. That was pretty important. And are you seeing too that actors want to do things that really matter to them?
Yeah, no, that documentary is excellent, is getting a lot of buzz, and I think is really important. It sparked a campaign called Caring Out Loud that Bradley Cooper's Foundation has launched, which is really terrific. It's like bringing caregiving out of the shadows again to help people who are caring for older adults or people with disabilities like not feel so alone or so isolated, have more resources at their disposal to help them understand how to get help. And then at the policy level, those people who have been personally affected can be galvanized to see that their activism can help to make change. So I think that's really important. I do think, actors and creatives write from their own experience. And so part of what we're hoping to be able to do is help them understand how their personal experiences may be the same or different from other people's, and also why including detail matters, and why in particular including like possible solutions or the imagining of solutions or the calling out of a lack of solutions can matter.
How do you envision the future of storytelling in Hollywood, in particular with gender caregiving and other family issues? What are your hopes for that, and what do you envision?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest hope is that two things. One, that we just see more depictions of people manage like talking about and navigating work and family issues on screen. Often in most shows, 80% of the time, for example, when a child is part of a show, uh, a child under 12 is part of a show, you don't hear about childcare. Only 20% of the time you do hear about childcare. And that's just not realistic. You often see characters who are hospitalized, who are probably have jobs or do have jobs, but you don't hear about how it is that they're able to take the time or what hardships they're suffering to take that time to be in the hospital, or same with their caregivers. So I just want to see those stories be more explicit, and then also have those individual characters' stories put into a larger context for audiences, not in a heavy-handed way. I think, there's often this misunderstanding that what we're asking for is like whole stories or series or story arcs that are based on these topics. And while that would be great, that is definitely not what's necessary to move the ball forward. What we really need is just to see work, family, and care show up on screen as it shows up in all of our lives.
And what is next for you, Vicki? Like what 2026, what do you feel you're going to be focusing on? Is it still going to Hollywood? Is it still trying to make that needle move?
I think it's going to be the intersection of all of these things. So I am, dedicated to helping Virginia, the advocates and the lawmakers in Virginia do what's needed to provide the research or the evidence or the expertise to help move their policy forward. I am doing work with a group here at New America called the New Practice Lab also, which works with states that have implemented paid leave already to understand or are implementing paid leave to take best practices on technology and administration and user-centered design to make those policies deliver benefits in the best possible way. And then, I think taking those a couple of things, taking those positive examples to Hollywood, I think can be very powerful and important. And then also just continuing to, encourage and provide resources and research that helps storytellers tell engaging, compelling stories that also have the effect of moving culture forward. And I think in this time in particular, where women's workplace participation and equality is so threatened, we saw several 100,000 women leave the workforce, especially Black women, over the last month or two. And then the administration just issued this executive order essentially writing nurses and some medical professions that tend to be women dominated out of the categorization as professionals, which eliminated their ability to get student loans or get student loans at a high enough level to pay for school. Like, that is not an accident. That is a targeted intervention meant to push women out of the workforce. And that is just like not acceptable in any way in 2025 or really at any time in the last 50 years or any time in the future.
Well, you have your work cut out for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hollywood can and will continue to tell stories that, include women as full and equal participants in the workplace and highlight discrimination and bias and difficulties where it exists and portray women as competent, equal people who, unless they choose to freely, should not be relegated to homes because opportunities are cut off in the workplace, particularly when wages are such that economically most families have to have all parents working.
I want to thank my amazing guest, Vicki Shabo, paid leave expert, senior at the Better Life Lab at New America Fellow, a change maker in Hollywood, and so much more. Thank you so much for joining me on the Paid Leave podcast, Vicki.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This has been another edition of the Paid Leave podcast. Please like and subscribe so you'll be notified about new podcasts that become available. Connecticut Paid Leave is a public act with a personal purpose. I'm Nancy Barrow, and thanks for listening.